there, friends, and welcome to This Life Without Limits. I'm your host, Weston McWhorter, and on today's episode, we're going to get into the complexity of what it means to be a leader, especially when faced with difficult challenges that require deep reflection, realignment, and commitment to purpose. Joe Paterno refuted Thomas Carlyle's assertion that leaders are born, not made, by suggesting that the only true path to leadership is forged in times of difficulty and challenge. Ryan Michler is a man who knows this all too well. Ryan is a combat veteran of the Iraq War, a father to 4 beautiful children, and the founder of Order of Man and the Iron Council. He's also the author of Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men, and more recently, the Masculinity Manifesto, How a Man Establishes Influence, Credibility, and Authority. Ryan has literally built his career and reputation on leading men towards lives of integrity and purpose, and yet he is most certainly human. This conversation takes place at a time in his life when he's navigating some really difficult and painful personal experiences that have, in a lot of ways, challenged how he's shown up in the world. Those experiences have afforded him the opportunity to reflect on ways he can shore up his own vulnerabilities in life and to continue to learn and improve as a father, community member, and leader. Leadership is a choice, and choosing to be a leader is a difficult and complex undertaking on a good day. But when everything in your world gets turned upside down, meeting those circumstances with humility, clarity of purpose, and equanimity can mean the difference between losing everything or emerging from a more grounded, credible, and influential place. I've been looking forward to sharing this conversation with you for some time, so let's get into it. Everybody, I just want to welcome Ryan Michler to This Life Without Limits. Good to see you, brother.
What's up, man? It's been a while, so I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time now.
Yeah, man. Me too. I feel like it's been at least a couple of years, but I'm glad
Probably.
we were able to put this together.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start out this conversation by sharing a story with you that I don't think I've ever told you, and this is a story of really how I came into Order of Man and the Iron Council, and really stepping onto the path of my own personal growth and development. So I won't bore our listeners and viewers with all the preamble that kind of led up to that, but basically to sort of set the scene, we're talking about early June of 2018, and I was sitting alone in the office of the business that I had at the time. It was a bike shop and a cafe in New Orleans. And this was after hours, after we'd closed up shop, probably around, 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. And I'm sitting there alone in my office, kind of bathed in the glow of the computer screen. And, was pretty much drunk, crying. At the time, I was really just feeling a lot of pressure around, the leadership of that business, things that were going on in my family. And I didn't really have any awareness that just a couple of months down the line from that moment, I was going to be forced to close the doors of that business and shoulder the massive amount of debt that comes with a failure like that. A few months after that, I'd be looking at, negotiating my second divorce. A few months after that, I'd be working with my ex-wife to sell our family home that we had built together. And a few months after that, filing for bankruptcy, man. And, all I knew was that in that moment, I was in pain, and it was something that, I didn't really know how to cope with or reconcile in any way, and so strangely enough, I was sitting there in front of the computer, and I just opened up a new browser tab and typed into the search bar, how to be a better man. And on the first page results, somewhere in there, I don't remember exactly where, was a link to Order of Man. And kudos to you and your team for whatever search engine optimization you guys did at the time.
We didn't do anything, so I don't know what it was.
But there it was.
God.
Yeah, and so I clicked on that link, cruised around the website a little bit, found the links to the podcast that you were doing at the time, and just really began to get curious about what you were talking about, and, kind of what I knew in my heart I needed to begin to put some focus on, And shortly thereafter, of course, at the end of June, I believe was my IC anniversary date, I joined the Iron Council and dropped in with a group of men who were really able to, hold me and support me in that time that was like super traumatic, really, really difficult, And I was, just really beyond grateful for that, man, because in that moment, like when I was alone in that office, I did not have a single man that I could reach out to, who I could trust with all that pain and all that difficulty that I was facing. And I didn't have any men that reached out to me, who really knew the depths of the experience that I was going through, And so I didn't really know it at the time, dude, but that was like the one thing for me that has changed everything in my life since then, and I wanted to share that with you because, in light of some of the things that you've been dealing with personally over the last year or so, I just wanted to share that with you because it was incredibly important. Like that time, I don't really believe in coincidences, man, but that choice that I made, that decision that I made to drop into to order man the Iron Council was pivotal in my life, dude. So I just wanted to, acknowledge you for that, and to acknowledge the men that showed up in that space for me. So I just want to share that with you, dude.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I hear stories like that. I mean, that doesn't diminish obviously your story, but it's it's humbling to know that it serves the way it has. That's been my ultimate goal. And I think in light of, like you said, some of the personal stuff I've been dealing with lately, I'd be in a much different position too. I'd be in a much worse place if I didn't have all the tools and resources and brotherhood that we've been able to create over the past 8 years. So
Yeah, man.
I feel like a Rogaine commercial. Not only am I the founder, I'm also a client, or however it goes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely, man. And again, I just kind of wanted to share this with you, that even just a couple of weeks ago, when things were coming down, you were sharing about your separation from your wife. I was sitting in meditation one morning, and for whatever reason, I started to get tears in my eyes. I was thinking about, and I mean, you and I aren't super close, right? Like we've known each other for a long time, right?
hmm
Through Order of Man, but there was a lot of like empathy and compassion in my heart during that moment, man, for what you're going through, and
yeah,
or what you must be going through, and I was surprised for a minute that like I was kind of feeling these tears rolling down my face when I was thinking about like just, you know, wanting to, in whatever way, send that empathy and compassion, across the space, to someone that I knew was dealing with difficult circumstances, man. So I'm
yeah.
curious how that lands for you, and how that experience has kind of unfolded for you.
Uh, what experience in particular? I mean, obviously there's a lot going on, but what
Yeah,
what what
man.
in particular are you referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just, in particular, the role of being in this position as that leader of men, that leader of a movement, that I know you're super proud of. And then in a lot of ways facing things that, I know you wish you probably wouldn't necessarily
Of
have to drop
course.
into. Yeah.
Well, here's the reality. The truth is the truth, regardless of whether or not we live it.
Mhm.
And as men, we fall short. We fail and we fall short, and we have our own baggage and our own demons and our own struggles and things that we need to deal with, and scars that we need to heal from, wounds, I should say, we need to heal from. And that doesn't, in my mind, diminish truth.
Mhm.
A good analogy I used the other day for this is, I want you to imagine for a second that you grew up as a young man watching Arnold Schwarzenegger lift weights and become, who he is today and who we know him as. And it inspired you. It inspired you to get off the couch at 10, 13, 14, 15 years old and go start lifting and get into bodybuilding or powerlifting or strength training or whatever. And you started to take control of your life and you got fit and you got healthy and you got lean and you built confidence and all these wonderful things happened as a result of the influence that maybe somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger had on you. And then in your 40s, you learn that Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm just making the story up, Arnold Schwarzenegger, gets fat and he gets out of shape and he gets overweight and he doesn't start, he stops lifting and he stops doing all of these things because he's a man and he makes mistakes and he has his own stuff he's dealing with. Does that diminish the influence, the positive influence that he had on you? Does that diminish the reality that getting into the gym and lifting and being strong is positively impacting your life? I don't think it does.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's in this movement who sees that they've implemented the tools that we have in the 12-week battle planner, and they've improved their relationship and they've improved their fitness and they've built confidence and they're making more money and they've paid off debt and they've done all these wonderful things. And then one day they look up and see the guy who headed it all up messed up, had a series of mess ups and screwed up and didn't always live to his ideal. Does that diminish his result? Of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do a better job separating fact and truth and good from the people who preach it.
Yeah.
Because we're men,
Yeah.
and I know it's easy for me to say because I'm in this situation, but I think we need to be very cautious of placing men on pedestals and ask ourselves if what they're sharing is true and accurate and will serve us in some way. If it is, implement it in your life. And if it isn't, then don't. But we need to be very, very careful of idol worship.
Yeah.
I've come across that. I've come across guys who are like, "No, I'm going to stand by you no matter what." I'm like, I don't know if you should. And then I've had on the opposite end of the spectrum guys who are like, "You're a piece of shit, and I can't believe you, and you're a horrible human being." And I can't help but think, what pedestal did that guy like that have me on,
Mm-hmm.
that I wrecked his world
Mm-hmm.
because I happen to be dealing with my own struggles?
Yeah.
And at times I feel like a fraud, and quite honestly, it is, and it's hypocritical. Maybe I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. It's not that I ever or stop believing in what I was saying. It's just that I was struggled implementing it at times in my life, and I still do, and I will throughout the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's hypocritical or not. I mean, I've looked at the word and I've looked at the definition, and I think hypocritical is intentionally deceiving somebody or manipulating somebody or sharing a message or something and believing the opposite. I don't. The
Yeah.
message I share is true and
Yeah.
it's good and it's helpful. Even though my family and my wife and I are going through our divorce, I still believe in families. I still
Yeah.
believe the family unit is integral to society. I still believe that a man ought to serve his wife. I still believe that he should be the head of the household.
Yeah.
It's not like that in my situation now, currently.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future it will be, maybe not, but I still believe all of that. And I'm
Yeah.
going to fight for that, even though I don't have that personally in my own life at this moment in time.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting that you bring up that the idea of putting people on pedestals. I was driving home from I was up in New Jersey this past weekend and had a lot of time to think on the road last night. And I'm going to use a word that I know you don't necessarily like that often, but I was thinking that when a man steps into a position of leadership, right, whether it's on a battlefield or in a corporate environment or in his family, right, that I think inherent in that role, there is exposure, right? And the word I was going to use is vulnerability, right? And that we put ourselves into places where we are vulnerable to being put on a pedestal, right, by others, and that's their own choice, that they want to put us in those sorts of places, but I'm curious, if in light of the circumstances and situations, if if there has been a realization around not how to shore up those vulnerabilities, but maybe just to, how you see that as a leader, right? Like as someone who is ahead of a movement, to know that there are those things that are out there lurking around. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're using the word vulnerability correctly,
Yeah.
accurately. Look, I don't care about words. They're just noises that we make.
Yeah, man.
It means
Yeah.
the word vulnerability only means what we define it as. So I don't care about the word. Some people
Yeah.
get hung up on that. I don't care if you're using vulnerability or humility or honesty or whatever. You can use these terms interchangeably. What I care about is the meaning behind it. And you're using it correctly. Most people don't.
Yeah.
Modern culture does not. Modern culture says vulnerability is just like barfing up your insecurities just for the sake of doing it. That's stupid. That
Yeah.
there's no value in that.
Yeah.
There's no benefit in doing that. Now, if you're sharing it for a reason, as in means to an end, then yeah, absolutely. Vulnerability is important. If
Yeah.
you think about the greatest military minds and leaders throughout the history of humankind, these are men who explored and pondered on vulnerabilities so they could fix them.
Yeah.
Like not so they can sit in them and so achieve some enlightened state. And no, it's like, hey, our wall right there is vulnerable to attack. We need to go fix it, or we need to put people there. We need to shore that weakness up.
Yeah.
That's what vulnerability means. Now I know language changes and times change. No,
Yeah.
that's what vulnerability means. And if you adopt the mindset that, hey, I'm going to expose my weakness, that's what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can shore it up. That's the
Mm-hmm.
point. And so
Yeah.
when you ask, what do I think about that? Yeah, it's difficult as a leader of men. I alluded to this earlier. It seems hypocritical that I have to expose my weaknesses for two reasons. Number one, so I can fix them. That's the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing. If I can't be honest about where I'm deficient or where I'm struggling or where I'm weak, then I'll be exposed to all sorts of threats throughout the rest of my life. And I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
So I need to be truthful about my weaknesses.
Yeah.
The other reason it pays to be vulnerable, using that term correctly,
Mm-hmm.
as means to an end, is that I can help other people who deal with the same thing, specifically men, because men notoriously don't talk about their feelings. They don't talk about what they're dealing with. They don't talk about what they're struggling with. And I know of plenty of men, especially as I've shared some of my things I'm going through, that have been dealing with things for decades
Mm-hmm.
and don't have anybody to talk to. Well, I shouldn't say that. They choose not to talk to anybody. I
Mm-hmm.
want to use those words correctly.
Yeah.
Don't have anybody to talk to is not accurate.
Yeah.
Choose not to talk to somebody is more accurate.
Yeah.
And so they suffer in silence. They live, as Thoreau says, quiet lives of desperation. They live life under what they could have otherwise lived if they would have faced the reality of their inadequacies at times and then dealt with it. So I don't wish what I'm going. Let me just explain what I'm going through first and foremost, if
Yeah.
anybody doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been struggling and dealing with alcoholism for the past several years. I'm sober now, and I've been sober for the past 8 months or so. And then the reason I came to that realization is 8 months ago, my wife said she wanted to leave. And so over the past 8 months, I've been working to correct my behavior and working to correct the way that I'm showing up. And in many ways, I've done a tremendous job. And in many ways, the damage done in
Yeah.
my relationship with my wife is overwhelming, you know, and
Yeah.
it's too little too late with what I'm doing now. So we're in the process, or I should say, I don't know, I got a letter in the mail. I don't really know how it all works, but
Mm.
we finalized our divorce. So that's what I'm going through. It's painful and it's hard, and I don't wish it upon anybody else. But to your question, I could wallow in it. I could mope around. I could be sad, and I am at times.
Yeah.
I could feel sorry for myself. I could paint myself as the victim. I can throw in the towel on Order of Man and all this other stuff. Or I can just drive on
Yeah.
and learn from my mistakes. And hopefully, my message and what I share, knowing that I'm going through some things that a lot of other men are going through, could be a catalyst for change in other people's lives. And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I'm interested in men becoming better,
Yeah.
myself included.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think so. So I, frankly, when I came into Order of Man, I had this perception, right? Again, and maybe this is my own choice to sort of perceive you in a certain way, to perceive some of the other men that are in leadership in certain ways, and as you know, inherently, I know that we're not infallible, right? But there is that aspect that was like, this is a standard that I know I want to live up to, and I felt that I was way below that, you know, and for me, through you sharing, right? Through you sharing very candidly, those challenges. I found a great deal of relatability and a deeper connection, right? To that empathy for you, for the other guys that are going through that, because you're right. I mean, there's so many men that I connect with and talk to and work with that they have no idea that, I mean, first of all, that they have access to other men that care about them, that care about their well-being, that have the capacity to like hold them in those difficult circumstances. And that there's a way through, and yeah. So for me, I mean, like actually when I was reading those posts, there was a tremendous amount of gratitude, man, for your willingness to share that. And to see some of the other, some of the backlash and other, bullshit that was coming around, difficult to experience that, and I'm sure it was for you as well, especially coming from people that I know you had a deep connection to and looked up to as mentors and leaders and things like that, so,
Well, I try not to take anything personally. I mean, the best thing you can do is ask yourself, is what somebody is saying true? And is it helpful? Like, that's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
People suck at communication. People suck at delivery. People are human. They have their own baggage and their own filters they're looking at your experiences through. I
yeah,
talked to a good mentor of mine, and he said, everybody's responding to life, whether it's my situation or their own, in the best way they know how.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And as
yeah,
many mistakes as you make and faults that you have, so do other people, and that's
yeah,
okay. Like, I've learned a lot of humility through this process. I'm trying to afford more people grace because I don't know what they're dealing with.
yeah,
I put on I won't say a performance necessarily, but I did put on my face, and I went out there and I worked hard and I tried to continue to serve men as I could, even as I was struggling with my own things personally, because that's what we do as men. Like, that's what
yeah,
we should be doing. And that's the
yeah,
right thing to do, by the way.
yeah,
And if I'm knowing what I was experiencing and going through and yet soldiering on, I would say, like, how many of us are doing that? Like, how many men do you think have it all figured out?
oh,
You look at these guys and you're like, oh, this guy's got a great family life. He's got a great business. He's making money. And yet he's miserable inside.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
millions of men like that, tens, hundreds of millions of men just like that. And when somebody comes at me in maybe a way I don't necessarily appreciate, I got to imagine maybe that guy's going through something. I don't know.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And besides, what's the point in taking things personally?
yeah,
There's no point. So
yeah,
ask yourself, is it true? Does it serve me? And if it
yeah,
does, if you can answer both in the affirmative, then use it. Who cares about how it's delivered? Just use
yeah,
it and improve your life.
yeah, yeah, man.
There's a really good book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and he talks about that. One of his agreements is, I'm paraphrasing, don't take anything personally.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Usually it's not. Even if it is personal, it's still not personal because whoever's sharing it is seeing it through their own lens, and that taints it. It
yeah,
might be right still, but it's not personal. It's the way they see life.
yeah, yeah. That's been a hard, that's one of my favorite books, and every one of the agreements, whether it's always do your best, be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, right? That like every one of those has gold in it, man. And I think probably one of the more difficult lessons for me to learn is that people respond to us based on their own experience of life, right? And that's
Right.
that's a really interesting way to, I mean, to engage people around difficult political topics, difficult religious topics, way, so like aspects of society, like everybody has this experience. Don Miguel Ruiz would call that, living in our own personal hell, right? Or in our own dream of the world. Um, and yeah, I firmly believe that even those four agreements, man, if you can work to implement those in your life, can change everything. I'm curious, I guess, how do things change in order of man, like based on based on these experiences for you? Does anything change? Are there aspects of, self-leadership that you've been thinking about in your own life that feels applicable um, to that program?
Not much really changes for the most part. Everything that people see is going to be similar. And unless they knew, they really wouldn't know because, again, what we're doing is right. How do I know it's right? Because it's served thousands and thousands of people who have shown me and told me that it's improved and helped their life in some way. So you're not going to really see a whole lot of changes from the outside. As far as me, the way that I lead with more grace, with more humility, show up with more kindness and compassion and empathy. I think generally I'm that kind of person, but I started to lose that quite a bit. And I felt like in a lot of ways I was leading from a position of arrogance and ego. And when you get kicked in the dick, so to speak,
Yeah.
like you realize, oh, maybe I don't have this whole thing figured out. And I
Yeah.
began to believe that I did. So yeah, I'm just trying to be more kind. I'm just trying to be more understanding of what other people might be experiencing, what they're going through, what they're dealing with, and just stop being so much of a dick all the time. And by
Yeah.
the way, I don't actually like being like that.
Sure.
I find more peace and more joy in being kind, and maybe even giving people the benefit of the doubt that don't deserve it. Because who am I to judge that person? Who am I to say that that person's doing it right or wrong, or they should be doing this or shouldn't be doing that when I have my own stuff that I should be working on and focused on.
Yeah.
So I I've been less judgmental of people. I've been more gracious in what they might be experiencing, and then just trying to serve and help by asking questions, by leading well,
Yeah.
and hopefully that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, man. I was talking to a guy last week about men's work, right? And about, the different flavors of men's work that are out there in the world, and how they can kind of be broken down into sort of three buckets, right? The construction kind of men's work, the destruction kind of men's work, and the reconstruction kind of men's work. And sometimes that all happens along a continuum, and I'm curious, kind of what do you think about that in terms of like a structure, and then, where do you feel like you're falling in there right now, yeah, we'll sort of leave it at that for the moment. Like, what do you think about that structure? And then where do you kind of find yourself in that continuum at the moment?
So you said construction,
Deconstruction,
deconstruction, and what was the other?
reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Well, I mean, you need all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to build yourself into something. I think that's where the construction comes into play. You've got to build yourself into something. You've got to make yourself something.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just follow the default course and assume that you're going to be doing well and that life is going to be good. Like you actually have to be intentional and deliberate about what you're creating, which means this is the first time I've heard that framework, which I really like, but which means that there's going to be certain elements that you have to take down. You have to deconstruct because we're not starting from a fresh slate, right?
Right. Right.
You've got baggage and you've got experiences and you've got stories and you've got narratives and you've got cultural upbringing and you've got little mantras that people have whispered in your ear for the past 3, 4, 5, 6 decades of your life that you're operating under and you're not even aware of it. So what do you need to get rid of? What do you need to tear down? It's like going to a construction site and saying, hey, I'd like to build this big, beautiful, housing project here. But right now we've got this ugly, worn down building from, 50 years ago. Okay, well, that's got to go.
Yeah.
That's what's impeding what we're doing, And so I think that's where the deconstruction comes in. What I would say maybe to the reconstruction is polishing a turd in a way. It's like, maybe the bones are good,
Yeah.
maybe there's some good things about who you are and what you've done and the lessons that you've learned or the stories that other people have told you, and now you just need to refine those stories a little bit to fit what you're trying to accomplish. I'm in this new place right now. You can see I've got a white backdrop here.
Yeah.
I've got to reconstruct my podcast studio.
Yeah.
So I've got I've got some decorations here. I've got some shelving. I've got some stuff I'm going to put up on the walls. In fact, I'm going to do that this afternoon. The wall's still good.
Yeah.
The podcast is still good.
Yeah.
Got my audio equipment, but
Yeah.
there's some things that need to be refined in order to give you a presentable product. And the same is true about who we are as men. Maybe you're fit, maybe you're strong, maybe you're jacked, maybe you're great with your physical acumen or health. Maybe your financial situation is dialed in, but you could learn to take some of that and apply it over to your family life, which is where I struggled.
Yeah.
Really good at the business stuff, really good at the financial planning stuff.
Yeah.
I struggled with the human connections at times. You know, I got impatient and angry and upset, and all these things trickled into that relationship and that dynamic. And what if I took my acumen over here and translated it over to my family and personal life a little bit better? Would my situation be different? Yeah, absolutely. So we reconstruct and we don't start over. Starting over means you're starting from zero. I'm not starting over. I read a post the other day. I can't remember where it was, but the guy said, "Oh, you know, I'm going through this thing and I've wasted, 20 years of my life." I'm like, no, you haven't.
Yeah.
I wasted 20. Like, maybe it didn't pan out the way that you saw it, but you're not starting over. That's a dumb phrase.
Yeah.
You've got so much knowledge, so much information, so much experience, so many life lessons that can be harnessed and used to build a new life. So don't you say you're starting over. Just say I'm rebuilding or I'm making this better. I'm shoring this up, but you're not starting over. It's not wasted. It's just experience that we can all use and learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the past can be really tricky, right? Like it can be so dramatic, so traumatic, I guess, that it can be seen as like, not only is it traumatic in that moment, but it serves to define you forever and ever. Amen. Until you're in the grave, and that's something that, I've certainly learned is not true, and the more days that I stack up between, that night in early June in 2018 and today in this conversation with you, the less, I guess, relevant the past is to my present. It's still important. It's still like, that pain is still a great teacher, when it needs to be. But yeah, being able to show up in a more integrated fashion, right? That sort of like wild man, wise man balance, and be able to embody that in the world for my children, my community, again, like the men that I work with as well, I feel like has been the work.
I don't think it's less relevant though. I mean, you said that it's like, oh, it's less relevant. Why should it be? Maybe it's not as painful.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not as emotionally jarring. And I imagine that'll be the case as I navigate the divorce I'm going through, that the wounds that I'm experiencing now are raw and fresh and hurt and are painful. And then, in a year or 3 years or 5 years, those will be less painful. And it's like a scar, you look down and you're reminded of the injury, but it doesn't hurt anymore. You're just reminded of the experience. You're like, well, I'm not going to do that again. That was dumb.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guys who are like, oh, I just want to put that behind me. Why?
Yeah.
I mean, I know why, because it hurts. It's not fun to revisit.
Yeah.
But the more that you visit it in a constructive way, the more powerful it is for you currently and for your future self.
Yeah.
As I go through this divorce, if I happen to get into another relationship or get married at some point down the road, good. Like, I don't want to bring any of that stuff that I had before into my new relationship. She doesn't deserve that. Whoever that woman is, like, she certainly won't deserve that from me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be treating people the way that I did. I shouldn't be acting the way that I did. And so it's good for me to remember the past. And it's good for, in this case, whoever that person might be down the road. Like, what if I had amnesia and just completely forgot all the lessons? Would I be a better man? No, I'd be the same guy because I'd do the same dumb things, right?
Yeah. Groundhog Day.
Yeah. But in Groundhog Day, he learns.
Right. Right.
Every day he's like, well, that didn't work. That didn't work. Groundhog Day is a weird example because all he has to do is sleep with the chick and then his, day moves on.
Right.
But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, so, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that, like, there's that shadow aspect of our lives, right? Where all that pain, whether it's from childhood or any time in our life, that gets, sort of tucked away into different corners of our psyche, I guess. If we choose to ignore that, and don't get curious about it, that it can show up in really harmful and damaging ways.
Yeah. I mean, the greatest question you could ask yourself is why,
Mm-hmm.
so if you're upset today about something, why? Why are you upset? If somebody triggers you, you mentioned before as people responding negatively in comments, if
Mm-hmm.
that triggers me and gets me upset, why? Why does that upset me? That would be a valuable question to answer. Is it because that person's right and I don't want to hear it?
Right.
Is it because I think less of myself because they might say something? Is it because I feel betrayed by people who I thought were on my team? Like
Yeah.
I'm only sharing this because I experienced all those thoughts.
Sure.
Okay, those are good things to know.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why? I think we need to ask ourselves that more often, especially when things aren't going well or we notice that we're not performing the way that we should. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you run to alcohol? Why do you run to addiction? Why do you get angry? Why are you frustrated? Why are you sad? Why are you glad? Like, ask yourself that and figure out, because then you can get to the root of it and shore it up. Or you can, if it's a positive result, then you can replicate it again because you understand why that happened. It's a
Yeah.
great question. Why?
Yeah.
As with this thing, as I shared some of this on social media and people have come out and, a lot of people have been overwhelmingly supportive and other people haven't. Yeah, I have close people who are like, oh man, I can't believe this person said this thing. And are you upset? I'm like, no, like, why? Like, I really don't want to be upset.
Yeah.
I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be upset. I don't want other people to have that much control over me. Like, imagine that somebody says something rude and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, I'm going to let this control my life for the next several months. I'm not interested in that. I'm really
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. What's your process for metabolizing that? Because I feel certain it affects you in some way, right? But rather than
Of
letting it
course.
metastasize, right? I think this is valuable information for people, right? Is rather than letting that metastasize and grow and like become this thing. Maybe it did, for alcohol. I don't know what your why is around that addiction piece. I'd be curious about that, but I'm also super curious about how you metabolize those difficult things.
I've told myself to be a bigger man, like to actually be the man that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great quote. I don't know who said it, but you can tell the size of man by the size of the things that bother him.
Mm-hmm.
And if words are the things that are bothering me, what kind of man am I?
Yeah.
Now, if somebody attacks and assaults physically my family, okay, I'm gonna concern myself with that.
Yeah.
That's a different scenario. Or if my business is tanking for some reason, or somebody's stealing from me, those are scenarios that I need to concern myself with.
Right.
But do I need to concern myself with what faceless, nameless people on Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
Facebook or YouTube
Mm-hmm.
say about me? No,
Yeah.
it's not a concern of mine. So I remind myself, I'm not saying I'm immune to it. I'm not. I'm saying that in those moments, I tell myself that. You can tell
Mm-hmm.
the size of a man by the size of the things that bother him. That's how I process it. And then I decide not to be bothered by it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, people are like, oh, well, how does it not bother you? Because I make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but doesn't it still get to you? Yes, but I decide. See, so many people are so emotionally immature with their emotions that they don't think they can control them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can't. I mean, certainly you can influence them. They happen, but you can certainly control your response. So if you're angry, for example, a young man, and I've done this, will get angry about something and he'll punch a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
And then you'll ask, why'd you do that? Because I was angry. No, because I know plenty of angry people who don't punch holes in the wall. So why did you punch a hole in the wall? And the answer is, well, I thought that was the response to anger. No, that was what you chose to do in response to anger. But the emotion and the response are two different things.
Yeah.
And I think it's Viktor Frankl that says, and I'm paraphrasing, that in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is where you get to decide something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we can separate ourselves from our emotion and give it some space and distance between our response, then we're more likely to respond more productively.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm angry at a person, for example, let's say I'm angry at you for some reason, and then I just go to you and I just blurt out everything I'm angry about, that's probably not going to go well. But if I give
Right.
it some space and let it process, what I might think about is I actually might start to process where you're coming from. Maybe you didn't show up to this podcast on time and I got angry and I wrote you a nasty email. I'm like, you asshole, like you said 1 o'clock and you never showed up and I'm busy and what a dick. Like that's
Yeah.
one response.
Yeah.
Or if I give it some space, maybe I send you an email. I'm like, Weston, bro, like we had something scheduled at 1. I know you to show up on time. Like, is everything okay? I'm actually more concerned with you than anything because this doesn't
Yeah.
seem like you.
Yeah.
And then you come back, you're like, oh man, my wife got in a car accident. It's just whatever, right? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, like see,
Yeah.
same scenario,
Yeah.
different, more mature, level-headed response. And that's
Yeah.
what's going to create the reality for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that, man. I think that is actually one of my favorite lessons out of Man's Search for Meaning, is that, and I think even Stephen Covey reprises that in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it just like pinned in my head, like, oh, take a breath or take 10 breaths, whatever you got to do to try and like get
Right.
from that trigger point or that stimulus to a thoughtful, a thoughtful response that is actually meets the level of concern, I guess.
You should, by the way, you should also be aware of this when experiencing positive emotions. Like you should not be overly emotional when it comes to positive emotions as well, because well, you see it. A great example of that. I'm coaching my 2 of my sons' baseball teams, and they're young, they're boys, they're competitive, they want to win. That's cool. But when things go really well, they like celebrate and they gloat and they do dances. And I had a coach when I was in high school playing football and baseball. Whenever anything went well, he would really caution us on over celebrating. He said,
Yeah.
act like you've done it before, act like you're going to do it again. And that was a big mantra of his. And that stuck with me. It's like, you don't need to gloat. Like you don't need to rub it in people's face. You don't need to overly celebrate it, because if you allow your emotions, even the so-called positive emotions, to have that much control over you, then you're giving just as much weight to the so-called negative emotions.
Yeah.
That's what stoicism is. People have a misunderstanding of it. They think it's the not expressing your emotions or not even feeling emotions. That's such a misunderstanding of stoicism. Stoicism is just understanding what your emotions are saying and what they're teaching you, and then just keeping them in perspective as you drive on with your life. And all of us, as not only men, but human beings, should do that. I'm angry. Why are you angry? Because that person took advantage of you. Why'd they take advantage of you? Well, because they're an asshole. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Or
Yeah.
maybe they took advantage of you because there's some vulnerabilities in your systems. Okay, then fix it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, let's stop putting so much weight onto everything. You see that on social media. People are upset about this and upset about that and riled up about this and worked up over that. None of it matters.
Yeah.
Literally none of it matters.
Yeah.
And we allow ourselves to get consumed with it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think probably one of the so I'm a word guy. Like I love reading, I love writing, I love words. And one of the words that I learned a few years ago was equanimity, right? And it's such a cool
Great
word
word.
because yeah, I mean, I say that to people. I actually have it tattooed on my wrist, to remind me of
You?
like, yeah, I have
It's actually
stillness
one of
on.
my favorite words. I'll share a quote with you in a minute. Maybe you already know it, but go ahead.
Yeah, beautiful, man. But I was actually going through one of Ryan Holiday's one of his like 10-day workshop thing, like online workshop things, maybe like early in the pandemic. And it asked to one of the questions was to develop a mantra for yourself that when you started feeling difficult feelings are coming up, maybe it's anger or fear or something like that. What was a mantra that you could repeat to yourself? And so mine was stillness on one wrist and equanimity on the other,
Love it.
because that's what I wanted to cultivate in my life. That's what how I wanted to show up for my children, as a co-parent, really just in the world, And so So yeah, if you remember your quote, say it, because I think for people that don't know what equanimity means, especially for men, it's a powerful quality of being, I think.
Yeah, I'm just writing it down, but because like I said, it's one of my favorite words. So here's a great quote. I pulled it up just to make sure I didn't butcher it, but it's by David Gilmour, and he wrote a book called Manhood in the Making.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the quote: "The real man gains renown by standing between his family and destruction, absorbing the blows of fate with equanimity,"
Mm.
which means calmness, clarity, control. Like these are all things that we should strive for as men. You know, we like I see so many guys, and I've been there too, just up and down, up and down, up and down. And by the way, not only is it not good for your own well-being, but people aren't attracted to that. Like
Yeah.
they're not. Women aren't attracted to that. Your children aren't attracted to that. They're scared by it because it's
Yeah.
confusing. And I've been there. And so there was times in my life, and my wife and I, my ex-wife and I have had a lot of good conversations. We still have a pretty great relationship, all things considered. Under the circumstances, it's the best possible scenario we could have.
Mm-hmm.
And I I I remember one day I said, I wish you would have told me more about how you were feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And she said something that hurt. It really hurt, but also was true. She says, I wish you would have created the space for me to do that.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, like dagger to the
Dude.
heart.
Uh-huh.
But remember
Uh-huh.
what I said, like we can't take things personally. We have to ask ourselves, is it true and is it helpful?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that to those the questions is yes. I did not create that space. And is she right? And is it helpful? Yes, because I want to create that space for the people I love and care about.
Yeah.
But I can't do that if I'm like, boom, 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 my emotion, high, energy, low, mad, sad, glad, happy, joyous. I cannot do it that way.
Yeah.
I can only do it in consistent response to what people are going through. So if my son comes to me and says, Dad, I'm so excited, I passed my exam for my learner's permit. Like, I'm not going to throw a huge celebration and, bow down to my son and
Yeah.
make the world revolve around him. It's like, hey, congratulations, bud. Good job. I keep it in perspective. And then when he comes to me, when he gets his first car accident, which will happen likely. Hopefully it's
Sure.
minor and insignificant. And I'm not going to say, you little idiot, you asshole, why, like you did this and you caught. No. Hey, are you okay? Okay, what happened? Tell me about it. How can we fix it? Okay, look, you damaged the truck. You got to pay for it. How are we going to pay for it? Even in things that don't go well, we can still have that equanimity, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And that creates a safe environment. I don't like the word safe space, but a safe
Mm-hmm.
environment
Mm-hmm.
for the people around you to express themselves and communicate with you, which is something I really wish I would have done more of in my marriage. And
Yeah.
frankly, I didn't, and I failed in that department.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I super relate to that. And I think that, you bring up safety. And I think that, creating an environment that feels safe for people to express themselves in the ways that they need to, and to know that, like you said, you're going to meet them with this kind of like, it's non-judgmental, it's not emotional necessarily, it's just calm and evenness. And I mean, that's how I've chosen to parent my children. That's how I've chosen to show up in the relationship with my ex-wife as well, is just with this steadiness, and it has created, um I think, again, like you were saying, like the best circumstances possible given the situation.
We need to be dependable. I think about survivors of domestic abuse, and I often wonder why these women, and in some cases men, will stay in a relationship that's clearly abusive, physically, mentally, emotionally, maybe sexually. It's abusive. It's an abusive relationship. So why do men and women stay in those relationships? Well, because the fear of the uncertainty is greater than the fear of their current reality. Meaning, we all know from the outside looking in that this is a person who should not be in that relationship, and yet they can't excuse themselves from the relationship because of the uncertainty. So what are people looking for? Stability. So much so that they would choose stable abuse over potential safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that's what people are looking for, then we can provide that for them.
Yeah.
I can show up as a rock. You know, you got a big boulder out in your yard. Nobody questions that rock. You sit on it, your kids play on it, they jump off of it, they put a cape on their back and they pretend that they're Superman, and they grow up with this rock and they remember with nostalgia this rock as a child.
Yeah.
And when they come home and, you know, you're a grandparent now, then their kids play on the rock, but they never question the rock. It's always there. It's always dependable. It's always there to play on. It's always there to enjoy. And I think that's what we as men should be doing. We should be the rock.
Yeah.
Financial concerns shouldn't be an issue for our family. Emotional safety, although I did not excel in this department, but I will given the chance again, should be something that our children and our wives can rely upon.
Yeah.
Like they should not have to question, oh, is dad angry? Is he going to be okay today?
Mm-hmm.
Man, if I tell my husband this, is he going to be upset with me? That should not be a question that they should have to deal with.
Yeah. I agree, man. So I got a couple questions for you. I know we're sort of getting close to the end of time here, but so what's bringing you joy in your life right now?
Somebody asked me this. Maybe did you ask me months ago?
I didn't.
Somebody asked me.
It was not me, man. But
no, you know who it was? It was Ron Christopher. He asked me. He says, "Well, he said that almost verbatim." I don't know, man. Like honestly, I wish I could tell you, like, oh, the daisies outside and the beautiful air, and I'm grateful, and I wake up with 15 things I'm grateful for, and I keep a gratitude journal. Like I wish I could tell you that. I don't. I don't know. Like I actually don't have a lot of joy in my life right now. Like, and I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just trying to be honest. There's been a lot of things that I'm suffering from regarding the consequences of past decisions. So my focus not right now is not how much joy I can have in my life. It's how can I show up the way that I need to show up.
mm-hmm.
And I don't think that brings me joy necessarily. I think it brings me a sense of pride and satisfaction. I'm proud of the way that I'm handling the situation I'm in. I'm proud of the father I'm becoming. I'm proud of our baseball teams. I'm proud of the time that I get to spend with my kids. My daughter and I, she's 9. I bought a bike at a yard sale for $10 and bought a $5 tube. And I thought, you know, this would be a cool project to do together. So I just tore the whole bike apart. And this, you'd appreciate this because you're
I
into
was going to
cycling.
say, dude.
Yeah, I forgot about that. In fact, I might need to pick your brain on a few things regarding the
You
bike.
got it,
It's
buddy.
just a little cheap, like huffy, you know,
Yeah.
kid's bike, but
Yeah.
nothing like you're used to, I'm sure. But yeah, broke the whole thing down, rebuilding it, painting it, you know, the way that she wants it and the colors that she wants. And so like, I guess that brings me joy. I talk about it and I smile. Man. So it's joyous.
I see you smiling. Yeah, man.
It's in there.
I think I remember in those moments, you know, really grasping for anything. And I mean, you mentioned flowers and the blue sky and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those are really valuable, like little micro moments to cling on to, man, because anytime, you know, we're on this side of the dirt, you know, is a good day to be grateful for, you know, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I will say also, now that you say that, hunting is something that brings me a lot of joy. You know, I get to hunt with my 2 oldest boys, and we're going to Hawaii in a month. We're going to Africa in a couple of months. We're going to Minnesota in 4 months. We're going to Montana in 5 months. Like,
cool, man. Yeah.
I love to hunt. My oldest loves it. My second, it's still up in the air, but he'll go. But yeah, we always have a good time together.
Yeah. I love that, man. Yeah. I was just thinking, brother, I started reading your book when I was camping with my son in North Carolina last week. And right there in the beginning of it, you talked about your love of choose your own adventure books when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And I share that, dude. I tore those up when I was a young guy. and I was just thinking, man, about metaphorically how interesting, like reading that in that book must kind of feel in life right now. You know, like I just remember like I would read the same choose your own adventure book like 3 or 4 times and choose different paths, you know?
Yeah.
And it stopped me as I was sitting by the campfire and just sort of thinking about like, man, choose your own adventure, huh? Like how, like, it just seemed very relevant, in the moment. And it seemed very relevant, maybe for you,
Well, that book I have a love-hate relationship with that book. I'm proud of it. I don't like writing. I'm proud that I wrote it. Served a lot of people. But that book released right after my wife told me she wanted to leave me. And I was contractually obligated to read the book. And I read it after she had told me that. And as I was reading it for the audio version, I was like, man, like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not good there. I need to fix that. I was so delusional. I thought, and this is something we need to be very aware of. I thought I had everything locked down. I really did. I honestly did. I thought that I was showing up. Yeah, the relationship was a struggle. I honestly, I thought it was more on her end. I thought that something was wrong with her, not anything wrong with me. How could it be something wrong with me? And so I put a lot of that on her shoulders, and I realized now, oh no, she was upset because of the way I was showing up, not because of anything on her end. But yeah, I had to read that book, and I felt like a real ass reading it. It's all true. Like I didn't lie about any of it. It's all true. It's just a sore reminder of the ways in which I was lacking and still continue to lack.
Yeah, man. Well, I just want to express my gratitude for you sticking with it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of value, a lot of medicine in those words and in the way you show up in your community. I want to ask you one more question, and then I know you got to jump on with the rest of your day, man. So this is the way I like to wrap up my podcast. I know you always ask people, what does it mean to be a man?
I don't actually ask that anymore, but
I am
interested in your question.
All right. So my question is, what does it mean to live a life without limits?
It's an interesting question. I haven't heard that one before. So the word limits is interesting. I'm kind of tripped up here a little bit. And here's why I'd say, because I think there should be limits. And what I mean by that is they should be self-imposed. Right? It should be self-imposed discipline, self-imposed limits, self-imposed structure so that you can live the way that you want. I don't want other people to, my first book is called Sovereignty. And I think that's probably synonymous with living limitless. And what I mean by that is that you're in control of your life. So the limits that you place upon yourself, voluntary constraints, let's say, for example, from alcohol, that's a limit of mine. Like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to step over that line. That's a self-imposed limit. It's not a cultural limit, certainly, but it's a self-imposed limit because I want to live a different kind of life than I was living before. So I guess to answer your question, I know I'm kind of bouncing around all over this just because it's an interesting question, is that it would be sovereignty, be ruling your life, not allowing others to place restraints and constrictions upon you, but you choosing which constraints and restrictions and limits you place upon yourself so that you can have what you want. I mean, that's the reality, is like, if I want to have a lot of money, I'm going to have to sacrifice some things. Maybe it's time with family. Okay, well, I'm not interested in that. So that's a constraint of mine. I just placed a governor on the business, for example. And I have with my business because I'm interested in coaching my kids' baseball teams, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, then I got to throttle back on the business so I can do that. Yeah. So I think it's just being in control of your own life is what I would say. Short answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great answer, man. It's a great answer. Well, listen, Ryan, I really appreciate your time, man. It's good to see you.
See you, brother.
Yeah, man. And I look forward to catching up with you very soon, man.
Likewise.
Take care, bud. That's it for this episode of This Life Without Limits. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and will join me again for future episodes. If you want to stay updated on new releases, hit the subscribe button below, and don't forget to check out the show notes for additional details and links. I'd also love to hear what you think about the content of this episode, so please feel welcome to drop any comments, thoughts, questions, critique, any of that below. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to next time. Until then, here's to a life without limits, my friends.